Keanu Reeves never liked fancy places. He always found peace in quiet corners where no one cared who he was. That day, the soft rain had painted the city streets with silver reflections. Keanu stepped inside a small vegan restaurant hidden behind an old bookstore. The smell of warm herbs and spices greeted him like an old friend. He chose a table near the window, away from everyone, hoping for a peaceful meal after a long day on set. The place was nearly empty except for an elderly monk, sitting alone at the center table. The monk wore simple orange robes and a necklace of wooden beads that clicked softly each time he moved. He looked up when Keanu entered, his eyes sharp and narrow. At first, Keanu paid no attention. He ordered his usual, a bowl of lentil soup with fresh bread, and rested his tired head against the cool window glass. But the monk kept staring. It wasn't the gentle stare of curiosity. It was piercing, cold, and carried something dark. A waitress, young and shy, brought Keanu's meal with a polite smile. She whispered, "That's a monk from the temple up the hill. He never talks to anyone." Keanu just nodded, dipping his bread into the soup. The warmth spread through his chest, calming the tightness he carried all day. But then, the monk stood up. His footsteps echoed on the wooden floor as he walked toward Keanu's table. Everyone in the small place turned to watch. The waitress froze behind the counter. The monk didn't ask if he could sit. He pulled out the chair across from Keanu and dropped into it like he owned the place. His beads clacked together, breaking the silence. He leaned forward, his breath carrying the faint scent of old incense. "I know you," the monk said, voice as rough as gravel. "You play heroes on screen, but inside, you are empty." Keanu looked at him, calm as a still lake. He didn't defend himself. The monk seemed annoyed by his silence. He slammed his palm on the table, making the bowls rattle. "You come here pretending you're one of them. A simple man eating simple food. But you're just a fraud. Your kindness is an act. Your humility is fake." The waitress gasped. A couple at the corner table shifted uncomfortably. Keanu put down his spoon, wiped his mouth, and met the monk's stare. "Why do you think that?" Keanu asked softly. There was no anger in his voice, just a tired curiosity that made the monk's rage seem childish. The monk sneered, his lips curling. "Because no one can be so kind without wanting something. You want praise. You want people to worship you. You want them to bow." Keanu glanced outside. The rain had turned heavier, tapping against the window like gentle drums. He remembered the countless nights he spent alone, helping strangers when no one was watching. He thought about the times he paid for strangers' food or gave his seat to an old man on a train, never telling anyone. These memories flickered through his mind like faded photographs. The monk leaned closer, his voice dropping. "If you're truly humble, prove it. Let me have your meal." The room fell silent. The waitress looked at Keanu, her eyes wide. The monk pushed Keanu's bowl closer to himself, soup almost spilling over the edge. He picked up the spoon with his bony fingers, staring at Keanu like he'd won some twisted game. But Keanu didn't flinch. Instead, he pushed the bowl the rest of the way. He stood up, reached into his pocket, and placed a folded bill on the table. Then he turned to the waitress. "Please bring him anything else he wants. I'll pay." The monk's smirk faded as he watched Keanu walk toward the door. The rain outside called to him like a promise of peace. But before he could step out, a voice rose behind him, a small, shaky voice that didn't belong to the monk. It was the waitress. "Sir, wait. He does this to everyone. He comes here, mocks them, takes their food, and never pays. He's not even from the temple. He's a fraud." The word fraud echoed in the small restaurant. The monk's face drained of color. For the first time, he looked small, almost fragile. People turned their eyes away, shame spreading like a cold wind. Keanu paused, his hand resting on the door. He looked back, his eyes gentle but sharp enough to slice through the monk's pride. "You can have my meal," Keanu said quietly, "but you can't have my peace." He stepped into the rain, feeling it soak his hair and jacket. Behind him, the monk sat frozen, his spoon trembling. The waitress ran after Keanu, an umbrella in her hand, but he waved her off with a smile. Keanu walked away, the city lights shimmering through the downpour. He knew the world would always test his kindness. People would mock him, take advantage, or try to break the calm he carried inside. But he also knew that kindness wasn't about who deserved it. It was about who you chose to be, even when no one was watching. And that night, under the cold rain, Keanu decided no one would ever steal. That choice from him, the rain didn't let up that night. It followed Keanu down the street like a quiet companion. His shoes splashed through puddles, but he didn't mind. Rain had a way of washing away the heaviness he carried inside. He remembered the monk's words, "Your kindness is an act," and let them swirl around his mind for a while before he let them go. Keanu turned into a narrow alley behind the restaurant. He liked walking this way. It reminded him that the world was bigger than movie sets and bright lights. He paused near a dumpster where an old man sat on a crate. His thin coat pulled tight against his bony chest. A stray cat curled up on his lap, purring softly despite the rain. The old man looked up, blinking against the drops that fell from the torn awning above him. Keanu crouched down, his knees protesting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small wrapped sandwich he had bought earlier but didn't eat. He offered it without a word. The old man's eyes widened. He took the sandwich with trembling hands, his fingers brushing against Keanu's. "Thank you," he whispered, voice rough like dry leaves. "People don't see me, but you did." Keanu smiled, nodding. "Take care of the cat too," he said softly. The old man chuckled, stroking the cat's soaked fur. It was moments like this that made the insults and rumors fade. He didn't need the world to believe he was good. He just needed to know he tried. Just as Keanu stood up to leave, a faint shuffle of footsteps echoed behind him. He turned and saw the monk from the restaurant, standing at the mouth of the alley, his orange robe plastered to his thin frame by the rain. His eyes were no longer sharp. They were desperate, like a man lost in a storm he didn't know how to escape. "Why did you do that?" the monk asked, stepping closer. The old man clutched the sandwich tight, watching the exchange with wide eyes. Keanu didn't speak at first. He waited until the monk was close enough to see the truth in his tired eyes, because he was hungry. Keanu said simply. The monk's lips trembled. His hands fidgeted with his wooden beads, the rhythm broken and uneven. "No. Why did you let me shame you? Why didn't you fight me back in there? You could have exposed me." Keanu studied the monk. He saw something raw beneath the anger, fear, regret, and a hunger that went deeper than any bowl of soup could fill. "If I had fought you, would you be standing here now?" Keanu asked. His voice was so calm it made the monk flinch. The monk dropped his gaze. The old man spoke up, his voice thin but strong. "I've seen men like you," he told the monk, "always shouting, always wanting to break what they can't understand." The monk looked at him, rainwater dripping from his eyebrows. "You don't know me. Maybe I don't," the old man replied. "But he does." He nodded at Keanu. Keanu stepped closer, close enough to feel the monk's shivers. "You're not really a monk, are you?" he asked gently. The monk's shoulders slumped. The alley seemed to hold its breath. The stray cat meowed, breaking the silence. "I was," the monk said, his voice cracking like old wood. "But they turned me away. I couldn't live by the rules. I was angry. I wanted to hurt people who looked happy when I wasn't." Keanu didn't judge him. He just listened, his presence as steady as the rain. "You still wear the robes. Why?" The monk clutched the wet fabric, his eyes darting away. "People respect monks. They listen. They feed me. It's the only way I know how to survive." Keanu's heart ached for him. He thought of all the nights he'd slept on cold floors when he was young. How easy it was to lose yourself when you had nothing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, folded bill. Not enough to save a man's life, but enough to buy him time to find another path. He pressed it into the monk's hand. The monk stared at it like it was a stone, too heavy to hold. "Why?" he whispered. Keanu's single quote's voice was calm, his eyes steady. "Because you're hungry too, not just for food, for hope." The monk's eyes filled with tears that mixed with the rain on his cheeks. He dropped to his knees, the beads of his necklace tapping against the wet concrete. "I mocked you. I stole from you. I don't deserve this." Keanu crouched beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. No one has to deserve kindness. That's the point. Behind them, the old man fed a piece of sandwich to the cat, his smile soft under the broken streetlight. The monk looked at him, then at Keanu. In that moment, the alley was no longer just a place for trash and forgotten people. It was a place where kindness broke through the cracks, where even the lost could find a reason to stand up again. Keanu stood and helped the monk to his feet. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you dry." As they walked out of the alley, the old man waved, holding the cat close. The rain began to fade, leaving behind the soft smell of wet earth and something more, a fragile promise that maybe tomorrow could be better. Keanu knew this wasn't the end. The monk's journey would be long, and maybe he would stumble again. But tonight, under the flickering city lights, one small act of kindness had changed two lives. Maybe three, and that was enough to keep Keanu walking forward, step by step, into the dark that was never truly dark as long as someone carried a light inside. The next morning, the city woke up under a blanket of mist. The air was cold but gentle, and Keanu found himself back at the same vegan restaurant, this time sitting outside on a wooden bench. He liked the way the early sun painted the sidewalk in soft gold. The waitress from the night before brought him a cup of herbal tea. She hesitated, then sat beside him, her eyes searching his face. "Why did you help him?" she asked, her voice small, almost scared. "He mocked you. Everyone saw it." Keanu stirred his tea slowly. The steam warmed his face. He watched people passing by, a mother pushing a stroller, a young couple laughing, a delivery man humming to himself. He took a breath before answering. People lash out when they're hurting inside. He said, "I've done it too, in my own way." The waitress frowned. "But you're Keanu Reeves. People love you." Keanu smiled, a sad, gentle smile. "Being loved doesn't mean you don't feel alone sometimes. Doesn't mean you don't make mistakes." The waitress fell silent. She seemed to carry something heavy too. Keanu noticed how her hands trembled when she touched the teacup. "He came here again this morning," she whispered. "The monk. He left this for you." She handed him a small folded paper. The edges were wet, the ink smudged in places. Keanu unfolded it carefully. Inside was a simple message. "I want to change, but I don't know how." Keanu read it twice, then folded it and put it in his pocket. "Where did he go?" The waitress pointed down the street toward the old train station. He asked about the soup kitchen, the one near the tracks. Keanu finished his tea and thanked her. He left a generous tip, enough to cover any meal the monk might come back for. Then he pulled up the hood of his jacket and started walking. The city felt different today, softer, somehow, like it wanted him to keep going. When Keanu reached the soup kitchen, he found the monk sitting on the cold steps outside. His orange robe was gone, replaced by a simple gray hoodie and old jeans. He looked smaller, like the anger that once filled him had leaked away overnight. Beside him sat the same stray cat from the alley, now curled up in the monk's lap. Keanu sat down beside him. Neither of them spoke for a while. They watched the trains come and go. People hurried past, too busy to notice two men sharing silence on the steps. Finally, the monk broke the quiet. "They turned me away," he said. "The soup kitchen. They said I had to wait, that they didn't trust me yet." Keanu didn't look surprised. "Trust takes time," he said. "You can't fix everything overnight." The monk stared at his hands. "I don't know what to do now. I'm tired, Keanu. I'm so tired." Keanu looked at him, really looked, beyond the dirt on his clothes, beyond the lines of shame on his face. He saw a boy who once dreamed of being something good, who lost himself along the way. "Come with me," Keanu said. The monk hesitated. "Where?" "Someplace warm," Keanu said. "Someplace honest." They stood up together. The monk cradled the cat against his chest, its purr the only sound between them. Keanu led him to a small community shelter a few blocks away. It wasn't fancy. The roof leaked when it rained too hard, and the beds were old. But it was honest. The people there didn't judge. They fed whoever was hungry, clothed whoever was cold. Inside, an older woman with silver hair greeted them. Her eyes softened when she saw the monk. Another lost one? She asked Keanu with a knowing smile. Aren't we all? Keanu said. He gently nudged the monk forward. He wants to change. The woman nodded, waving them in. The monk looked back at Keanu, his eyes filled with a fear he couldn't hide. What if I fail? He asked. His voice cracked under the weight of the question. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder. Then you try again, he said. Fall 7 times, stand up 8. The monk's eyes shone with tears he didn't bother to hide. He stepped inside. The cat still clutched in his arms like a promise that he could be better, softer, kinder. Keanu didn't follow him in. He stayed at the door, watching as the shelter workers led the monk to a warm meal and a clean bed. He knew his job wasn't to fix the monk's life. It was to remind him that a different life was possible. As he turned to leave, the silver-haired woman called out, Keanu, wait. He stopped. She pressed a small slip of paper into his palm. For you, she said, from the donation box. Keanu unfolded it. It was a note from an anonymous donor. It read, Thank you for believing in the broken. You remind us that people are worth saving. Keanu folded the note and tucked it into his wallet beside the monk's first message. He stepped back into the city, the afternoon sun breaking through the mist at last. Sometimes kindness was just a small stone dropped into a dark well. You never knew how deep it would go or whose thirst it might quench. But Keanu knew he would keep dropping those stones, one act at a time. Days turned into weeks, and the city slowly shifted from cold mist to a softer spring warmth. Keanu kept busy with his work, but part of him always wondered how the monk was doing. Sometimes, late at night, he would check the slip of paper the monk had left him. I want to change, but I don't know how. He would read it over and over, reminding himself that even the smallest spark could light up a dark corner. One rainy evening, after a long day on set, Keanu found himself back at the old community shelter. He brought bags of groceries, fresh bread, vegetables, warm blankets, simple things that brought comfort to people who had nothing. The silver-haired woman welcomed him with her soft, tired smile. He's been asking about you, she said as she helped him unpack the groceries. He's different now, still has a long way to go, but he's trying. Keanu felt something warm in his chest. He asked where the monk was, and she pointed to the small garden behind the shelter. He found him there, kneeling in the dirt with the stray cat now grown fat and lazy. Sprawled next to him, the monk was planting herbs, mint, basil, and tiny green shoots that smelled fresh even in the damp evening air. When he saw Keanu, the monk stood quickly, brushing soil off his hands. His clothes were still simple, but clean. His hair was trimmed, and his eyes no longer looked like empty wells. You came, the monk said, almost a whisper. Keanu crouched down beside the herb bed. How are you? The monk smiled, shy and small. I'm learning. The people here, they make me work. They make me talk. They don't care who I pretended to be. They only care who I am now. Keanu nodded. That's the hard part, staying honest. The monk's hands trembled as he reached into his pocket. He pulled out his old string of wooden beads. They were worn. The color faded from years of rubbing between anxious fingers. I want you to have these, he said, pressing them into Keanu's palm. Keanu looked at the beads, feeling the rough edges against his skin. These are yours. The monk shook his head. They used to remind me who I pretended to be. Now they remind me who I was when I lost my way. Maybe you can carry that reminder better than I could. Keanu didn't argue. He tucked the beads carefully into his jacket pocket. The stray cat rubbed against his leg. Purring, the monk chuckled, scratching the cat's ear. He follows me everywhere now, he said. Guess he thinks I still need watching. Keanu laughed softly. The sound felt good in the chilly air. We all need someone to watch us sometimes. Just then, a commotion rose near the shelter gate. Two teenage boys stood there, arguing with the silver-haired woman. Their clothes were thin, their eyes sharp with fear and hunger. Keanu could see they were trying to act tough, but underneath, they were just kids looking for a place to belong. The monk noticed them too. His face tensed for a second, memories flashing behind his eyes. He stood up, wiped his dirty hands on his pants, and walked over. Keanu followed, watching closely. "We're not beggars." One boy shouted at the woman, "We're not gonna scrub floors just for soup." The other boy shifted from foot to foot, glancing nervously at the street. He looked ready to run. The monk raised his hand, asking the woman for a moment. He faced the boys, his voice calm but firm. "I used to be like you," he said, angry, ashamed, thinking if I acted big, people would respect me. The boys stared at him, confused. "But anger is a chain," the monk said. "It keeps you tied to things that break you down. If you want to eat, come inside. Help us plant. Wash dishes, feed the cat. You'll earn your meal. You'll earn your peace." The boys looked at each other, then at the silver-haired woman. Their shoulders dropped, the tension leaking out of them like air from an old tire. They nodded. Keanu watched as the monk led the boys inside. He could see the young man he used to be in their stubborn eyes. Maybe this was why the monk had to break, so he could learn how to help others heal to dot later. As Keanu prepared to leave, the monk caught up with him at the gate. "You could have just walked away that night," the monk said. "Why didn't you?" Keanu smiled, pulling the beads from his pocket. He held them up so the monk could see. "Because someone did the same for me once." The monk's eyes filled with quiet gratitude. "Will I always feel guilty for what I did?" he asked. Keanu placed a hand on his shoulder, his voice soft but steady. "Maybe, but guilt is a good teacher. Just don't let it become your master." The city lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the shelter's garden. The boys inside laughed as they fed scraps to the stray cat. The silver-haired woman stirred a pot of soup that smelled of herbs and hope. Keanu turned toward the street, the beads heavy in his pocket, their meaning even heavier in his heart. He knew this wasn't the end, not for the monk, not for the boys, and not for him. Kindness was a thread that wove through every broken part of the world, stitching it back together, one gentle knot at a time, and he would keep tying those knots for as long as he could. Weeks melted into months, and the city's trees turned a gentle green as spring finally settled in for good. Keanu kept visiting the shelter, always quiet, never wanting to draw attention. He would drop off bags of rice, warm jackets, or sit by the garden where the monk now worked every morning. The stray cat had become the garden's king, sprawling lazily among the mint and basil plants the monk had coaxed into life. But peace has a way of being tested, even when you fight to hold it close. One evening, Keanu arrived to find the shelter in chaos. The silver-haired woman was standing at the front gate, talking to a young police officer. Her hands were shaking as she explained something he couldn't hear inside. A small crowd had gathered. The monk was nowhere to be seen. Keanu stepped forward, heart heavy with a sense of dread. The woman spotted him and waved him over. Her voice cracked when she spoke. "The boys, the two young ones, they got in trouble," she said, eyes glistening with worry. Keanu listened carefully as she explained. The two boys the monk had helped weeks ago had gotten into an argument with a local gang. Near the train tracks, it had turned ugly. The monk had stepped in, trying to calm things down. He'd managed to pull the boys away, but one of the gang members had been injured in the scuffle. Now, rumors were spreading that the monk was to blame. "He's gone," the woman said, voice trembling. "He left before the police could question him. He thinks he'll only make it worse if he stays." Keanu felt anger and sadness twist in his chest. He knew the monk's past, how he'd run when life got hard. But he also knew how hard the monk had fought to change. He couldn't let him throw it away. "Where would he go?" Keanu asked. The woman shook her head. "He's scared, Keanu. He thinks he's ruined everything." Keanu didn't waste another second. He slipped through the narrow city streets, his mind racing. He checked the alley behind the vegan restaurant, empty. He asked the old man with the cat crate behind the bookstore, no sign. He even walked through the misty park where the monk sometimes sat and fed birds crumbs from his pocket. Finally, just as the streetlights flickered to life, Keanu spotted him near the old train station. The monk was sitting on a rusted bench, his head in his hands. The wooden beads Keanu had returned tied tight around his wrist like a promise. He didn't know how to keep. Keanu sat down beside him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The trains rumbled past. carrying people who didn't know how one small fight could break a fragile hope. You ran, Keanu said softly. The monk flinched, his shoulders curling inward. I'm no good, Keanu. I thought I could change, but I can't. Trouble follows me. People get hurt. Keanu's voice was calm but heavy with disappointment. You helped those boys. You pulled them out before it got worse. But someone still got hurt. The monk snapped, his eyes wide with guilt. It doesn't matter what I meant to do. All that matters is I failed. Keanu turned to face him fully. What about the boys? If you disappear now, they'll think they were right to run. They'll think hope is just a lie. The monk looked away, shame burning in his cheeks. They'll be better off without me. Keanu shook his head. No, they'll just grow up to be you. Years from now, sitting on some bench, convinced. They can't be saved. The monk's breathing turned shallow, like a trapped animal's. What if they hate me? What if everyone at the shelter hates me for bringing trouble? Keanu's eyes softened. People don't hate you for falling down. They hate you for staying down. The monk's eyes filled with tears. He pulled at the beads on his wrist, like they were shackles. How do you do it, Keanu? How do you stay good when it's so easy to give up? Keanu let out a slow breath. I don't stay good. I just keep trying. That's the difference. The monk covered his face with his hands, his shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Keanu placed a hand on his back, letting him cry. The trains rumbled on, indifferent but steady, just like kindness needed to be. When the monk finally lifted his head, his eyes were red but clearer than they'd ever been. I'm scared to go back, he whispered. Good, Keanu said. It means you care about what happens next. The monk managed a small, broken laugh. Will you come with me? Keanu stood up and held out his hand. Always, side by side, they walked back to the shelter. The stray cat appeared from nowhere, trailing behind like a tiny shadow. The silver-haired woman stood waiting at the gate, the boys behind her, looking like they hadn't slept all night. The monk stopped just before the gate. His feet felt like lead. Keanu leaned close and whispered, You're not here to be perfect. You're here to stay. The monk nodded. He stepped forward, shoulders straight for the first time in a long while. The boys looked at him, guilt and relief mixing in their eyes. He didn't promise them anything except this, that he wasn't going anywhere. Keanu stood back, the beads warm in his pocket again, his heart lighter even as the night settled in around them. He knew it wasn't over. Storms would come, mistakes would be made, but hope was stronger when shared, and tonight, that was enough. Weeks passed, and the nights grew warmer as spring slowly turned toward summer. The shelter garden bloomed under the monk's careful hands. Herbs, wildflowers, and small vegetables sprouted where there was once only bare dirt. The stray cat slept in the sun, fat and content, no longer needing to hunt scraps behind dumpsters. Keanu watched it all quietly, never drawing attention to himself. He came by in the early mornings sometimes, bringing fresh seeds, gloves, or bags of soil. He never stayed long, just long enough for the monk to know he wasn't alone. The boys he had helped were no longer restless shadows at the gate. They worked the garden too, laughing as they argued over who could grow the biggest tomato. In that messy patch of green, they were becoming something they had never been before needed. But life never stays gentle for long. One evening, a letter arrived at the shelter's front desk. The silver-haired woman found Keanu outside, sitting under the awning, sipping tea with the monk. She handed the letter to the monk, her eyes soft but worried. The monk opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a single line of handwritten words. We know where you hide. There was no signature, but the monk didn't need one. He recognized the ugly ink, the sharp, rushed letters. It was from the same gang he'd confronted by the train tracks. Keanu took the letter and read it slowly. His jaw tensed, but his voice stayed calm. They're testing you. They think fear will break you. The monk's hands shook. Maybe they're right, he whispered. I've spent so long running from fights. I don't know how to stand my ground. Keanu looked him in the eye. Yes, you do. You stood your ground with me that night in the restaurant. You didn't realize it, but you did. The monk's breath came out in a shaky laugh. That was different. No, Keanu said. It was the same. You were angry, broken, pretending to be strong. Now you're honest about your fear. That's real strength." They talked through the night. The silver-haired woman made them warm soup and sat nearby, listening as Keanu and the monk planned what to do next. They decided to tell the boys first. No secrets, no shame. When the boys heard about the threat, they didn't run. Instead, they promised to stay close, to protect the garden that had become their sanctuary. A few days later, the gang showed up at the edge of the shelter's street. 3 men, faces hard, voices louder than they needed to be. The boys froze. When they saw them, the silver-haired woman stood at the gate, hands steady but eyes afraid. The monk stepped out, Keanu at his side. He wore the wooden beads tied around his wrist again, not to hide behind, but to remind him how far he'd come. The gang leader stepped forward, sneering. "Look at you, monk without a temple. You think you can play hero now?" Keanu didn't say a word. He just watched, ready to step in if things turned ugly. But the monk surprised him. His voice didn't shake. His hands didn't hide. "You want me," the monk said. His eyes locked on the leader. "Fine, I'm not hiding. But you won't touch them." He gestured back at the boys, the woman, the garden blooming behind them. "They're not your prey." The leader spat on the sidewalk. "Big words for someone who begged us for scraps last year." The monk nodded. "You're right. I was weak. But that's over. You want to hurt me, do it. But understand this. I have nothing you can take anymore." For a heartbeat, the street went silent. The gang leader stepped closer, close enough for the monk to smell stale smoke on his clothes. But instead of swinging his fist, the leader looked away first. Maybe it was the calm in the monk's eyes. Maybe it was the quiet weight of Keanu's steady presence behind him. Or maybe kindness, when rooted deep, made cowards out of those who fed on fear. The gang left that night, their threats empty on the cold wind. The shelter's old door closed behind them, shutting out shadows that had haunted the monk for years. Later, when the garden was quiet again, the boys lit a small fire in a rusty barrel. They toasted stale bread and fed scraps to the stray cat. The monk sat beside Keanu, exhausted but lighter somehow. "I don't know if they'll come back," the monk said. "Maybe they will," Keanu said. "But now you know you can stand." The monk looked at the beads on his wrist, then at Keanu. "You think people can really forgive someone like me?" Keanu didn't answer right away. He watched the boys laugh by the fire, the silver-haired woman dozing with her head against the garden wall. He thought of all the strangers he'd helped in silence, all the days he'd questioned whether kindness was enough. "Forgiveness isn't given," Keanu said finally. "It's earned over and over. Every day you wake up and do better, you earn a piece of it." The monk smiled. It wasn't big or bright, but it was real. "Thank you," he said, voice raw. "Not just for that night at the restaurant. For not letting me drown in who I used to be." Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We're all someone else before we become who we're meant to be." The stray cat climbed into the monk's lap, purring like a small promise. The boys threw more scraps into the barrel fire, their laughter echoing into the warm night. For a moment, the world felt simple, not easy, not perfect, but honest and worth fighting for. And as Keanu sat beside the monk under the soft glow of the shelter lights, he knew kindness would never be wasted, because every act, no matter how small, stitched the world back together where it had been torn apart.